Robert Dumaro. I am a longtime board member of the High School of Fashion Industries. I am absolutely beyond delighted to be here with my dear, dear buddy, Mara Urshel. And the delightful thing is Mara is also a board member of the High School of Fashion Industries. And we are so thrilled to be participating with this career day. And so to that point, let me introduce Mara. Mara, welcome to this fun discussion that you and I will have.
Well, thank you, Robert.
Thank you. And I thought it would be interesting to point out how you and I actually first met. Since we're talking about careers, we actually first met when you were with Saks at the time, and I was in my trend forecasting world. This was in the early 90s,
Right.
and Saks was a client, and you were my client, and that's how we first met. So to that point, in terms of your career journey, Saks is how we first met, as I point out. So what was your journey up to that point in terms of your role, and what was your role at Saks for that matter?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, the journey has been a very exciting one, and it continues to be exciting no matter what happens. But my journey started with a completely different career path that I chose sciences and chemistry, and graduated from University of Michigan, and had to work doing sciences because I had to earn a living, but discovered that that really was never my passion. And it probably wasn't, because I was really pushed by my parents to do something more substantial, because I kept talking about fashion, fashion, and they kept laughing. What is fashion? No, you can't do that. So that's how I ended up what I did. But fortunately, there came a time in my life that I really started thinking about what is my passion. And I did that by experimenting with different part-time jobs while I was still working at the lab, being very successful, publishing papers and doing things that I would have been proud of if that was my career. But I started very lowly as a clerical at Garfinkel's in Washington, and very shortly afterwards became a buyer. And so 6 years later, after buying for Garfinkel's, I moved to New York and started a career at Saks Fifth Avenue.
And let me even ask that you said, because your study was in the sciences. Actually, my background's in sociology. I see, of course, fortunately, how I applied my sociology background in trend forecasting. How do you feel that your education background in the sciences was applicable to your newfound career path?
Well, sciences is very specific and very detailed, and it's almost like cooking. If it says a half a teaspoon, you have to have half a teaspoon, and you kind of relate that to everything that you do in your life. It's a certain way that things have to be done, and that's what I think I loved about retail. The fashion, of course, and that was always exciting to see what people would like. But the fact that you had to be very organized, very specific, very detailed about the financials, about the planning process, about analyzing your customers, and that just kept on going through all these jobs and positions that I ever held. At Saks, I started out as an assistant to a divisional, which was quite a nice step after having been a buyer only for 6 years. And at that time, Saks was owned by Gimbels. And so,
Yes, that's right. Gimbels. Yes, Gimbels. There's a retail history story.
it was exciting to start at a time like that, because
Yeah.
you really learned from the beginning. There were no computers, everything was manual. And you went home with shopping bags full of little papers that had to be put on books. So you worked all night long. And the hours were very long at that time in retail, because there were no computers that you could have concise reports. Well, very shortly after that, I was promoted to become a divisional of intimate apparel and blouses. And I learned a lot from that, because it gave me a whole different perspective of another industry.
Mhm.
I had to learn about more or less about stock, basic stock, and keeping basic stock, and being really more fundamental than just buying dresses and suits and coats. And then, very fortunately, I became the first woman vice president at Saks Fifth Avenue. So,
That's what I remember. That's the part that I remember.
meeting, and the average age was probably about anywhere from 65 to 100 of men smoking cigars. And I went to my first meeting and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Where am I? But they were very good sports because every time I came up, there was a cigar in front of my place card. So I collected them. And it was a great time. It was a time that you could really be creative and you could come up with ideas out of the box and have people work with you and execute them, and got a lot of energy going. And then we hit the 80s and I was promoted to go into sportswear and coats and dresses, and I had all these buyers and vice presidents at that time working there, and we came out with such incredible creative things. When I became a senior vice president, very shortly after that, I developed the first private label program at Saks called Real Clothes.
Yeah.
And the idea was out of the box that I didn't want to become, that we would create this collection that would become a part of just a small department. So I worked very well with the president at the time, who was Bertansky, and I said, I would like to separate it like a separate company. And if the stores wanted Real Clothes, they had to agree to a space, a decor, and all of that. And it all came out to be extremely successful, and we did $13 million the first year. So after that, every store wanted it, and I felt like we really achieved something great stuff. But that was a big thing. And then after that, the idea translated into Career Clothes, which was called The Works. And all those things lived at Saks for a very, very long time, even after I left, which was a big, wonderful thing for me to feel that I accomplished something that was important to longevity in the store.
Let me even ask you this in terms of, because I know students are very interested in the idea of trends, since that's how we knew each other originally. When you, in terms of trend information, how did you actually then basically apply trend information to the retail setting? What did trend information mean for you?
Well, you know what? This is something I think would be important for young students, and to realize that you have to, sometimes you hear a little idea and it may or may not relate to what they're talking about, but it may relate to what's in your head. And for example, Saks is always known for more expensive clothes. And if anybody had a pair of shorts for $25, Saks had it for $125. And it may have been the same short. Well, Bertansky, and I have to give him credit for this, kept egging me on. He says, why do I have to buy my shorts at Land's End or Gap or somewhere else? And I just kind of poo-pooed it because I said, because we're Saks, that's why. And you have that thought in your head, and I started thinking, he's absolutely correct. The world is changing, and there are those things out there, and we have to be a part of it. So one day I called two of my vice presidents and I said, I have this idea and I want to execute it immediately, and it's going to produce that $25 pair of shorts. The whole idea was Real Clothes, but it all came out from the fact that somebody said, why don't we have this? And instead of being defensive about it, which I certainly was from the beginning, is to start thinking about what is going on in the world and what do we need, and there is a place for this, and if we do it well. And doing that was the idea of Real Clothes was that everything was real. At that time, cotton was not a common commodity. A lot of sportswear was polyester and synthetic. So cotton was starting to become something that people really understood. we took, I bought tons and tons of books from military to agriculture, and we took items that related to different things that were very real, like
Mm.
Navy jacket from the French military, like the butcher block jacket from the United States, and we put that together and made that into a story.
It's funny, the whole utilitarian story, which is, of course, always relevant, as you and I know, historically, let alone now in the way we're living our lives now. So let me fast forward a little bit from Saks, because then we know the successes you had at Saks, and then your movement beyond Saks. Well,
Yeah.
actually, fast forward sort of to what brought you to the Kleinfeld story, or what that you actually totally invented the current Kleinfeld story. Let's let Kleinfeld talk Kleinfeld. Yeah.
Saks was an incredible ride of 20 years. And it was exactly 20 years that I knew that there was time for me to change and there was time for me to do something else. And I didn't know what it was. So, of course, at that time, I did what everybody else did. I formed a company and called it a consulting company. And I consulted for one exciting person was Lisa McIntyre because I
Oh
certainly
yes, that's right. I remember. Yes. Yeah.
she wasn't. I wasn't in marketing, but she chose myself and Ronnie and Missy LaMonaco at the time to be the triumvirate that would change her life.
Wait, Missy LaMonaco. Okay, Missy LaMonaco, who's another dear friend of mine from Bonwit Teller. I didn't realize Missy LaMonaco was working with you with Reba McEntire.
Yes.
That is so fun. Oh, I gotta talk to Missy about this. I didn't know that. Okay, good.
And then we strategized Reba's life totally differently from what she had been doing, which was doing a lot of travel, a lot of shows, making a ton of money.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Change, I could never get it, but she wanted to do something different. So we really set up a career path for her, a brand new career path that would make her the spokesperson for all of country and make her the ideal person that would be up there doing all the things that she ever wanted to do. And one of them was acting. And of course, in addition to singing, she was pretty good at acting. So through our connections, we introduced her to the Broadway, and she was in Annie Get Your Gun. She was the most perfect Annie Get Your Gun that could ever.
She also was in a concert version of South Pacific, sidebar, when she was brilliant. She blew me away. So
it was an exciting time for us.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was Japanese stores that merchandised 1,500 stores for Japan because they really did not know the American way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So, to make a story short, in the 6 years that I had my company called Clear Strategic, I got a call from one of my old friends at Saks who had, I knew him, that he had opened the first Saks off Fifth. And he was like the pioneer of off-price for Saks Fifth Avenue. And he said, I am with a company called Gordon Brothers in Boston, and they just bought Kleinfeld. And they need some help because they really don't know the business. And what happened was that they had bought Kleinfeld's almost out of bankruptcy.
Mm.
And I had known the company because they were big customers of mine of buying off-season goods, tons and tons of off-season goods. But this was a new venture for them, buying off-season companies. And of course, Kleinfeld's was one of them. And so I started with them consulting part-time while still continuing my Japan business and slightly with Reba. And I found that I really loved it. It was a broken company. It was a disastrously neglected company, financially in ruin and not getting any better. The dresses were old.
And Mara, let me ask, you had not dealt with the bridal industry prior to that, correct?
Well, I did have Bridal under me when I was a senior vice
Okay,
president.
I was curious about that. Okay,
It was very, very small.
right,
My other responsibilities, because I had 55% of the store at that time.
right.
Other responsibilities were quite large, so that I never really paid that much attention to such a small business.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, so the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and Gordon Brothers had put in millions and millions, and received really nothing for it. They didn't see anything happening that was going to save them.
And let's also remember, I mean, many young people might not know this. Kleinfeld had an iconic history. I mean, that's what we all remember, from back in the past. I mean, we're talking about a heritage brand,
It
an
was
iconic brand with
iconic.
a
It
major history. So yeah, so
was
it was worth saving.
absolutely. It
Yeah,
was formed in 1941 by the Kleinfeld family, and it had become the place to go once you got your engagement ring from anywhere.
yeah,
It was prior to a development of a lot of bridal stores in New York or anywhere around that area. So people made a pilgrimage to Kleinfeld's to buy a dress. And normally it was at a good price, probably a discounted price for many, many of the vendors and so forth. When they sold the company, the original Kleinfeld's family sold the company in 1990 to a French man called Michel Zonley, who did not, he was an accountant. He didn't know anything about retail.
mm,
So 7 years passed, and the company almost went into bankruptcy. And this is when Gordon Brothers stepped in and bought it from Michel Zonley. And I was there at the company for almost a year, and I became very close to all the people, and felt very bad that they were losing all this business because the clothes were old, the place was old. There was nothing right about the company, nothing. Customer service was bad. There was nothing you could do. So one day, Gordon Brothers said, the company's up for sale. So I went home and I said, you know, it just feels right.
mm.
I want to own this company.
Wow.
And Ronnie said, okay, let's call Wayne Rogers, who was an old friend of ours. Some of you may remember him from MASH.
Just for young people don't know, Wayne Rogers was a very established actor, especially in television and TV show MASH. So he was in the entertainment business, but also in the investment world, as I recall.
Very major investment world, and
Right.
probably he was on Fox, and he was probably one of the top stock projectors. And
Right, right.
anyway, so Wayne said, I don't know anything about bridal. Let me think about this. So he called back 2 days later, and he said, I asked my lady friends about Kleinfeld. They said, oh my God, of
They knew the history. They knew the history.
everybody knew about Kleinfeld. So
Right.
this process started, and in 1999, we bought the company. We signed the papers on June 9th, which at 5 o'clock, because Gordon Brothers held out for a better price, which we did not negotiate. We bought it with no debt, so we didn't have to worry about paying back all these amazing sums that were owed. And at 5 o'clock, it was a very sad time for me because my best friend's brother had passed away that night.
Mm.
And I wanted to go to Ohio. And Ronnie said, if you go and if you don't sign that paper, we don't have a company.
Mm.
So that was a very tough decision. And sometimes painful things happen, and then you have to make a decision that you can catch up with later, but something has to be on the right path.
Mm.
Obviously, to own Kleinfeld's was the focus of our life, and it was the passion that I was going to put into it, and Ronnie as well. So we bought the company that night. They signed at 5 o'clock. If it hadn't been signed at 5 o'clock, the doors would have been closed and there would be no Kleinfeld.
So that makes your ownership of Kleinfeld a Gemini experience, since you did it on June 9th, the day after my birthday. So let's then go forward a bit to present day. Students like to know what someone's typical day is like. So if you could describe what your sort of typical day is like. How would you describe that?
Well, I'm involved in every single department of the store, and so my meetings are very broad, from meeting with everybody, meeting with all the managers, uh, talking about. I get involved in every little single detail, and I'm trying to kind of get away from that because I have excellent people now that are taking a lot of responsibility, which
Mm,
is wonderful, and I'm very very happy about that. But you know, the bridal business, no matter how you work it, it's selling one dress at a time.
right.
Therefore, that one customer is the most important thing in your life at that time. So everything has to be followed through with the ordering of the dress, with the shipping of the dress, with everything coming in quality control wise. We do a lot of customization. Uh, we have we have 275 people working in the company, 110 of them in alterations department, doing beading and pressing and sewing and fitting, and everything has to be done exactly accurately, like in chemistry, just right
Right.
to the point.
There we go. Thank you. Come full circle. Well, now see, to that point, I always think it's very crucial to point out to people that the bridal industry, your company, is not like any other retailer in the sense that that is what you're pointing out. That one purchase of that garment is not like any other garment. There's so much attached to it psychologically, emotionally. It's a, there's so much about that one garment. It's not like going out and buying any other piece of clothing. So that you're saying that one process of that purchase and everything, all the steps related to it, that's why it's not like any other store. It's not like any other retailer. So,
It's nothing like probably the most expensive purchase a girl will make in most cases. And it will be not only the most expensive, but the most important. And with all the things that you said, emotionally,
yeah,
and the first time she's going to be walking down the aisle, having eyes of anywhere from 100 to 150 to 300 to 400 people looking at nobody but her. She's
mhm,
the star of the show. She's on the red carpet, and everybody is going to be watching what she's wearing, what she looks like, her hair, her flowers, everything. That pressure on the bride is immense, and it translates at the time that she's putting on the dress, because all of that is going through her head. Is this what I feel like? Is this the right thing? Do I want to project myself? Is this my personality? Um, and of course, the money. Is this what I can afford? Is this going to be my budget? Do I want something better? All of those things go through her head, with her mother and her best friends there, who are helping her with the decision. So that's why it's not like anything else in
right.
the world. And the construction of that dress is nothing like in the world.
Well, and to that point that you're starting to touch on the idea of the construction, so in terms of general trends, because students like to hear about that, what are some of the general bridal trends that you're sense, especially since we just came out of a bridal market in October? What are some of the general trends that you're feeling are happening now in bridal?
Yeah, I think the bridal industry has changed dramatically in the last 10 years.
As we know, right?
It was very, very slow in identifying fashion or even changing. You can look at dresses that span 2 decades and they look very similar. Uh, but all of a sudden, something happened that the ready to wear became a high influence. And the trends of ready to wear became uh, translated into bridal trends as well. And the important thing about that was because women were getting married much later in life,
Mm,
they had their careers, they knew a lot more, and they wanted to have their personality expressed in the clothing, which never happened before. Because before, the dresses were frilly, lacy, a real bridal dress. But if a girl wanted to have something that really was her, this was why an amsala and a verwang created their collections, because nothing at that time existed. And we're talking about that was 20 years ago.
And also you're bringing up something very important sociologically. Again, in the past, and this is very general, and because the bride was younger, more than likely it was her family that was making that purchase. Now it's the consumer herself is making that purchase. So I'm guessing that will also have an impact on this whole process. Is that a fair thing to say?
Exactly, it does.
Yeah.
And many times it's also the combination of the fiance and the bride.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Paying for the wedding. So therefore, sometimes you have the fiance coming with the bride to select the dress, because it becomes an accessory to the whole party. Unfortunately, that takes a little bit of the romance away, and all of the things, the tears when you're walking down the aisle.
Right. First time seeing the bride in the dress and all that. Right. Yeah.
It does happen at times. But I think the most important thing is that people change, and you have to understand exactly what the changes are. And the changes are for Kleinfeld's. Kleinfeld's is, I call it a department store, because it's very, very broad in demographics. It's very broad in price points, and therefore we cater to many different types of customers and different types of taste levels. So we have girls that buy a $2,000 dress, and we have a girl that buys a $25,000 dress. So it's almost like you have to have different departments. So I relate that to also my experience at Saks.
Right.
A department for this kind of a bride, that kind of a bride. We have a bride for the major wedding at a cathedral. We have a bride for smaller weddings, the garden wedding. We have a bride for going away weddings, beach weddings, all of that. So they become like different departments that you have to do price-wise a good selection. But the important things are that there's always some fashion trends that continue throughout all of that. And right now, it's the mermaid.
Still, yeah.
Mermaid dresses are very important, because it shows your figure, because most of the girls have already taken time to go to the gym and try to get ready for their moment. And also it has a lot of fullness on the bottom, which satisfies the gown part.
Mm.
So it's a very sexy and yet a beautiful look. That is like number one silhouette. But there's all the other ones: ball gowns, sheaths, A-lines, uh, not only fit and flare. Fit and flare is very important. So all of those things really are represented almost on every designer line. So you have to be very selective and understand the fit of every designer, the quality of every designer, the working relationship. And we have there's one vendor specifically, and I won't mention the name, that is an incredible success story. And the success story really relates to the fact that everyone in that company has a retail mind, not a manufacturing mind.
Okay.
They have 40 people in their marketing department that follow every website of every bridal store in the country. And they have people that call the stores to find out if their things are selling, where they're located, how can I help you? Do you want my people to come out and do some training? They really do nothing but think about how can we do better at retail. Sounds like a simple thing, but it's highly unique.
Okay, but this is an important point. So on that note, in terms of the students want to know this, understandably, in terms of thinking in their future, advice for young students who would like to go into the bridal industry. What you're bringing up is, I think, a very important point of this one company doing that kind of crucial research. I mean, I'm understanding that you're clearly pointing out that that is a key to success in that business. something that any other points that you could bring up in terms of advice for students?
I think that if for someone who really wants to get into the bridal industry, and it's not an easy industry because most of the industry is comprised of mom and pop stores. We're kind of a highly unique company. We're the largest in the world currently in bridal, and it's not usual that you find that because most of the brides go to their small boutiques wherever they are. So
Mhm.
if someone, and that's true because it is a passion business, and you're selling one bride at a time. It's not massive volume unless you're in a very low price point. So my suggestion would be that you find a company that is a large company that you can find a place where you can really learn about the function of what makes that successful. Whether it's this company that I described that has a retail point of view,
Mhm.
or that you learn more about manufacturing and how to save money in manufacturing, or how to deal with retailers, and how to have your eyes open to continuously understand from day to day what are the trends are, where is this country going,
Again, we go back to the trends.
what is it you want, what do they want. And when you see something happening, when you have a dress in that all of a sudden you sell like 4 or 5 dresses in a day, which is not unusual at all. But all of a sudden you analyze that and say, oh my God, that's something we haven't seen before. Go get it. And
Mm.
start developing that and expanding into that process. And that's how you start growing the business. But the most important thing about growing the business is having a relationship with your vendors,
Mm.
and that they understand what your what your strategy is and what you expect, and get their help in working with you because you can't do it alone. And also in ready to wear, when you see a good dress, you say that's gonna be a hot seller, and the chances are it will. In bridal, until you get it on the body, you don't know that.
And I'm going to bring up an important point that you and I always like to talk about. I mean, bridal industry talks about this. A bridal dress is not just a white dress. So that idea of, people think a bridal is just a white gown. Well, no, there's a lot more to it than that. That's right. I mean, that's the correct thing to say. Um,
There's construction and there's fit. Of course, there are dresses that are very lightly constructed, but it still has to fit well. And right now, also, there's a trend for simplicity. Not so much a lot of beading and stress, but a lot of more simplicity. Although we're selling a lot of beads and a lot of appliques. When there's a simple dress, the production has to be so precise.
because let's remember that dress is being worn once,
Right, and it has to be perfect. And
right?
And the bride doesn't even like to know that it moves with her body. She'd like to think that it's going to be perfect, and you have to make it that way and make her happy that way. And of course, there's always a bustle, and right now we have bare backs and a lot of illusion. There's so many wonderful things going on that are in the fashion world of bridal that it's just very, very exciting. The thing you have to watch for is that the trends are not secretive. Everybody knows them.